Hello, welcome to another episode of In Orbit, the podcast that explores how technology in space is helping empower a better Earth. I'm your host, Dallas Campbell, here at the Satellite Applications Catapult at the Harwell campus. Today we're going to be talking about CCNs, which stands for Connected Capability Networks. To find out a little bit more about what all that means, I am joined by three very special guests.
So hi, I'm Phil Carvil. I'm the Head of Clusters for the Science and Technology Facilities Council, part of UK Research Innovation.
Oh, lovely. My name's Jessie Hamill-Stewart, and I'm doing a PhD at the University of Bristol and University of Bath, where I'm part of the Cybersecurity Centre for Doctoral Training, where I look at cybersecurity in space. But then I also help to lead and deliver a Space Connected Capability Network, which is funded by Satellite Applications Catapult, delivered in partnership with lots of space clusters across the UK, and also with those at the National Composite Centre, and especially Space West.
Cybersecurity in space. If you had to sum up your PhD in one sentence, what would it be?
Keeping our modern lives durable.
Yes, I would read that. I need to keep my modern life durable. Modern life's so complicated.
Yeah.
It's really complex. I'm happy that you're looking after us.
Yeah, we're more
Good.
reliant on
Thank
space
you.
than we could ever imagine.
This is what the podcast is all about. Simone.
So yeah, I'm Simone Hartless. I'm Head of Capabilities and Clusters here at the Satellite Applications Catapult. So my team focuses on supporting the UK space ecosystem, which includes the connected capability networks and the clusters, as well as delivering innovation and business support services, knowledge exchange and skills activities across the whole of the UK.
There we go. Thank you very much for being here. Hey, you connected capability networks. That's what we're going to talk about today. It sounds, well, I did a bit of reading about it and I kind of got to the end of my reading about it and I still wasn't sure what it was about. So connected capability network, CCN, what is it? Who wants to start?
I'll let Simone start with that one.
Okay, no pressure.
Well, we've been working...
So I can understand it because I read the brief and I had to read it again to try and
We'll go at the most simplistic
really simple
level. So for the last 10 years, we've worked with places across the UK through clusters about
clusters
being industry and academia working together with local government in a certain place to grow the space ecosystem.
So different regions of the UK. So
like different localities.
Cornwall, North Yorkshire.
Space up Yorkshire, covering off Yorkshire, over in Northern Ireland, NI Space, Scotland. So across all regions, nations and localities in the UK, there are 14 different space clusters. So they're there to help in industry and academia to work together more collectively and collaboratively. Okay. So we've got the place element covered.
Okay.
So the CCNs are kind of pivoting to kind of be capability-led. So we have place-based and capability-led.
What is capability-led mean?
So no matter where you are in the UK, there are experts and assets such as kit and equipment that can help you to develop products and services using space data and technology. And it might be that you can work with your local community through your space cluster to do that. But there's also could be a counterpart in another part of the country that's working on similar products and services. So we can do more and go further with those activities and be more innovative by connecting the dots in those two areas and working together. So this is about connecting on similar...
So it's like a dating agency?
Yeah, a little bit. It's about raising awareness of the opportunities.
Is that fair? So it's like people are doing their stuff in different parts and you guys come along and go, oh, did you know that Phil's up in... where's Phil?
Northwest.
In the Northwest.
Yeah.
Doing Phil things. And then you should go and check him out.
Well, I think the key thing about this is all about how do we build awareness of what's out there,
do people not know what's going? I mean, when you say we're quite a small geographic country, and it's an industry where people generally know each other. Are there big gaps? And
I would say, if we are comparing this geographically, the size of the UK to things like the States and America, then yes, we're geographically small, but we are enormously diverse and rich in the great science, technology, engineering, and industry we do. Because of that richness, there's a lot of value to connect together.
Yes.
So we can really tackle some of these great challenges and opportunities which come from the space sector, including those many unknowns.
In the case of the SciSpace CCN, it's not just bringing people together who already know each other. For example, in the space, the space industry, lots of people do know each other. But for the SciSpace CCN, we look at cybersecurity and space domain awareness. So
when
people,
sorry, there was a term you used. I didn't. SciSpace.
So the name of the CCN, which I helped to deliver,
Okay.
is called the SciSpace CCN. CYSPAC.
Crikey. So what does SciSpace mean?
It's a combination of cybersecurity and space domain awareness.
Yeah.
And the whole purpose of our CCN, as Simone just eloquently described, is to bring together people who work in the cyber kind of industry, who work at securing networks, IT, OT networks, and then also bring people together who work in the space domain awareness kind of industry. And that could be people in military, government, academia, and people who work in the cyber industry. People who work in the space domain awareness industry do not know each other necessarily. They do not know who they are, and they do not know the work that they're kind of working on, even if they're all in the same kind of local region or local area. So the CCN does a really nice job of putting those people very literally, very physically in a room together.
Do they have like kind of like socials, like kind of discos and like we're going to have a, like how does it, when you say they sort of get together, what does that
So I mean
like?
it in a very literal sense. At the moment, the SciSpace CCN is running some workshops across different parts of the UK.
Right.
So as Simone mentioned, Northwest, actually, near you, Phil. But Northwest, Northeast, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Southwest, South Central, which is London. And essentially what we're doing is we're holding workshops in all of those regions in which people who know about SDA, space domain awareness, and people who know about cyber can get into a room together and talk about what capabilities they have in that region. And then they map that to you're not going to like this, requirements catalogue, which we've developed from the first work package.
I'm on a mission to like de-buzzwordify the space industry. There's a lot of buzzwords.
I'm going to throw one more but think about those water cooler moments. And this is what
That's
we're trying to do.
okay. That's kind of transcends buzzwords now.
Exactly. How many times have you met someone, at a water cooler, whether that be, in a building, conference bar, whatever, and you found out what they did and think, brilliant, you should talk to so-and-so. And that's what we're trying to do, but in a more targeted manner through these networks.
That makes sense.
Actively curated serendipity.
Oh my goodness.
Was that a thesaurus there?
Actively curated serendipity. Okay, I forgive you because I love that buzzword. I'm gonna have that tattooed on my arm.
Yeah, I really like
I'm
that.
gonna have that actively curated serendipity. Yeah, that's good.
So think about your social circles. How you have different groups of friends
Very
for different
limited,
things.
my social circles.
But it's ultimately about bringing those circles together so that they can solve each other's problems and challenges with the ultimate aim of creating new innovation and jobs. Investment. I
think in my mind, or most people's minds, we just assume everyone knows what everyone else is doing. But actually, no, what you need is a CCN to kind of help.
You're so busy with the day-to-day of doing your individual job. You don't have time necessarily without some support to kind of connect those dots, to kind of look out more broadly.
Okay. So that's great. That makes sense. Thank you for clarifying that. I suppose the big question is, why does this matter? I mean, obviously, all the things that you've been talking about are important. But let's just we could talk a little bit about what's at stake here in terms of the areas we're talking about and why that connectivity, that connective tissue that you guys provide, if that's the right word, matters.
I mean, space is quite important. It's quite, it's not
we're
just...
on Series 5, so if we haven't established it's important now, we're in trouble.
That's reassuring. But, everyone can listen to this for their first time. But I think, space is important. In particular, space domain awareness is really important.
Space domain, so space, people are aware of that.
Yep.
Big vacuum black thing up there.
Absolutely.
Space domain awareness.
So
what do we mean?
Lots of the satellites which are launched up into space have cameras attached to them. And those cameras can help to kind of visualize what is happening in space, but also what is happening on Earth.
Yeah.
And space domain awareness is all about looking at what is going on. What do we have to be worried about? We may have heard in the news that a meteor is coming quite close to Earth, and we have to be aware of what's happening in space in relation to what might then be impacting us on Earth. And so, but actually, when we talk about it within the context of the CCN, space domain awareness is really about that data processing. And so the source of the data, where the data comes from, maybe images, where it comes from initially might be space, But then the whole process of SDA is the processing of that data, because it can't just be used when it's like a raw image. It has to be processed and analyzed so that it's usable, so that it can create interesting insights. I hope that's not a buzzword.
No. Then, interesting is definitely not a buzzword.
And then disseminated to people who then will use that data to make decisions. Why security is so important to that process is because you really want to know that data that you've initially got, maybe the image from the satellite or coordinates of where the meteor is, you really want to know that it's correct and that it's accurate. And security issues, cyber attacks, could potentially falsify some of that information and some of that data. And so you really want to know that the data that you're using to make important decisions is accurate, because otherwise you might make the wrong decision.
And we have 3 CCNs that are live at the moment, and the 4th one is just launching this summer. And so they look at slightly different topics, but ultimately it's about bringing those communities that are experts about space with those non-space sectors, those people that have problems in other communities that might be able to be solved on Earth, or in the case of microgravity, pharmaceutical and life sciences firms could use the space environment to produce drugs that they couldn't do on Earth. So it's about making sure that those different community groups are able to talk to each other. And so why is it important? Because they can do things that they couldn't do on Earth. They can do things that they couldn't do through other tools that are on Earth already. It's about doing things more quickly. So connecting those dots so that people are innovating for the fastest and most effective solution to solve those on-world problems.
When we think about different industries using space, you have some great examples. Even cosmetic firms like L'Oreal, they've used space to actually think about how that can get new insights for formulations and products they're doing.
So would the CCNs get in touch with like cosmetics companies, for example, or companies that maybe don't know about space or don't think about it in terms of how it might improve their industry, and go, oh, by the way, that we can put you in touch with these guys? And
absolutely. Part of it is, yes, you want to grow your existing space community, the people building those platforms in space, those satellites, etc. You do want to build that capability, particularly here in the UK. We want to build resilience in that, sovereign ownership, etc., so we can really harness the assets we have. The other side is who's going to use those platforms, and that's your point there. So how can cosmetic companies understand the opportunity for space, either from a data side, or as Simone was saying there, getting, information from how certain behaviors are in space, like materials, how they interact, fluids, etc., and can that then improve what they do here on Earth, and in the future, thinking about how they design products and services for human habitation, which is actually outside of the Earth as well. There is that thing about how we also look at beyond Earth as well. And that's a lovely segue to say our next CCN will be having that title of Beyond Earth.
It just sounds good, Beyond Earth, though. Exactly. Because I'm thinking of that planet with the aliens in the water, the KP-18b, whatever it was. But probably not that far beyond Earth.
Doesn't sound as exciting when you say they're in the vicinity of the Earth, but not quite on Earth network.
Yeah, Beyond Earth is it's kind of quite romantic and also suitably vague. So it ticks lots of boxes. Just a couple of things. First of all, what's the role of the catapult in all of this? Like, where does the catapult fit into this? And also, I want to know about how it fits into the national space strategy, sort of more broadly.
So the Catapult is funding the 4 pilot connected capability networks, building on our experience of working to develop clusters through our Centres of Excellence programme. So we're looking at making sure that we reach out to those non-space sector specialists in particular.
So you said that there's 4 pilots. So what are those?
So we have CySpace, CCN, and we also have the UK Earth Observation Network for Sustainability. So looking at things like using Earth observation images to support the efficiency of agriculture, for instance, and food production. We also have the UK Autonomous and Connected Earth Connected Capability Network, which is looking at the automation of different activities that space enables, but also being able to connect up from like a SATCOMs point of view. So, you've all been going down a country road and you've got no a mobile signal. So connectivity and being able to make sure that there are no black spots where you don't have connectivity is really important for day-to-day life, not only for kind of safety, but also to be productive. If you want to work at home in a village, it's very difficult if you don't have coverage. But if you can converge terrestrial and non-terrestrial networks and give that connectivity, it means that we can do a whole lot more things more effectively and more efficiently.
Is that going to happen?
That's what we're working on, is convergence.
I'm in a slight dip and I can't get any, but the beams don't even go down into my dip, so whatever.
So some space solutions might be able to overcome them.
Great.
And then the fourth, final but not the least, is the UK Beyond Earth network. Again, looks at that Beyond Earth environment that we were talking about. So the Catapult is funding these with partners as an experiment to see how this works to help the UK work together more effectively. And they're very much important and in line with the National Space Strategy, because it's about connecting a whole UK space ecosystem. So no matter where you are in the country, if you've got space expertise, whether that's an academic, whether that's a company, whether that's a piece of kit and equipment, you're able to connect those. And so the UK can get the most jobs and investment from that.
Got it. Why don't we remind ourselves what the National Space Strategy is? Why should people care about it?
Yeah, so the National Space Strategy was launched in November 2021, and that set out the government's vision to bring together the capabilities that the UK has in different space specialisms. So that includes Earth observation, satellite communication, position navigating and timing, for instance, that you all use on your sat navs, and other capabilities such as kind of those beyond Earth assets. We call them in orbit servicing and assembly. And that sets out the government's vision to kind of then corral and bring together industry and academia to say, okay, we recognise this is important, and leads the way for us to put a place marker down for the UK to be a scientific superpower on the global stage, but also for companies and academics to then invest in certain areas of R&D, research and development.
Just to say that companies wouldn't even know where they could potentially invest. They don't know necessarily where the potential kind of opportunities are, unless they are, again, in this room together and communicating. So a lot of the issues that the other CCNs focus on, as well as SciSpace, they are fundamentally space issues, beyond Earth space issues, but they're also incredibly interdisciplinary issues, and they really can get a lot of value from people from other sectors coming in and providing their input and kind of solving some of these space problems. For instance, with the SciSpace, where people from the cyber community, they don't necessarily work directly on space, but a lot of what they work on does apply to the technology used to get satellites up to space. That's one aspect of it. And then the other aspect of it is that people in academia, military, government, SMEs, primes, all these different types of organizations, they don't naturally communicate with one another. CCNs provide this amazing opportunity for people like myself, academia, to get in touch with people in kind of larger companies or in the military who are working on similar issues, essentially operating in silos. You're not going to like that, but operating in isolation, not realizing, that you're actually part of this giant kind of national effort to increase space resilience.
And the national side is really key. One of the points you mentioned earlier was, why is this important now more than ever?
Yeah.
And I think that's very clear, from the government at the moment. The priorities are growth, and where the space sector can both build resilience in industries, help them innovate, but also where that can drive new industries and jobs. And that's one thing very key with these CCNs. They deliver on those missions, as well as support other ones, like how do we make sure our health services fit for the future? Yep. And then Simone was saying autonomous systems, drones being used to help with blood sample collection. This is where you can really see, space isn't just away from me. It's also affecting industries and services here on Earth. And that's, priority for the UK as well as nations around the globe.
One thing I've noticed, and you may have noticed as well, is that the world changes radically every week. Like every week there's like a new thing that we've got to sort of worry about. How sort of fluid are CCNs? Do they go, okay, actually we've got to think about defense now? Do the CCNs sort of kick into action and go, right, okay, let's talk to get the defense people and these guys talking, and so you're kind of working with the speed of change?
Yeah, so they're dynamic enough that in terms of, like I said at the start, they're a pilot, so that we have kind of a clear plan of action of how you're going to tackle some of these issues right at the start. Yeah. But you learn from kind of working together, and that's why we didn't launch all 4 CCNs all at once. They've kind of been a staggered, and each one has learned from the previous CCNs. So ultimately, we were able to pivot and address some of these challenges and say, okay, this is no longer kind of in scope. This actually is the latest challenge that we need to kind of focus our efforts on.
And also they are, I think that's right, that they're all kind of 2-year programs. So the SciSpace is the first iteration of a number of programs within that kind of defense realm. So they have that flexibility in that what we're doing is what was set up in the initial kind of proposal, last year, let's say. But then how we kind of pivot and how the program changes and alters over time might change according to the wider kind of geopolitical context. And right now we're focusing on space domain awareness, but maybe for the next iteration, after this first 2-year program has ended, we might focus on a different aspect. Maybe I like the concept of data centers in space. How cool is that? Like futuristic concepts like that. Maybe that's what will be the focus next time.
Yeah, and sort of energy production in space and manufacturing in space. I mean, I saw an interview with Jeff Bezos. You may have heard of him. He was talking about, why don't we just move all heavy industry into space? And then we can turn the Earth back into some kind of pristine form. I don't know, it kind of makes sense.
I think with anything that you do in space or even on Earth, you need to think, what is the benefit of doing it in that environment?
Yeah.
Great example there, we're exploring the use of orbital data centers in space. Data centers here on Earth, very heavily energy intensive to cool them down. What's the environment like in space? Extremely cool. So you can think about where there's advantageousness in building certain industries in space. Taking full-scale manufacturing, if that manufacturing is to build quite common goods on Earth at mass scale, you probably aren't going to devote your resources to building those in space. However, they're very complex, where they benefit from being in space, such as semiconductors, so chips. The environment of space helps you crystallize things nearly perfectly.
Pharmaceuticals.
Exactly. So these high value industries, now, if you can make sure there's enough of a launch cadence so you can get those products and services, supply chains working, then you unlock a very strong business case for it. And I think there's some really fascinating areas where you could explore further. 3D printing, fantastic thing on here on Earth. One of the issues you have to build, though, is a scaffold because it will collapse because of gravity. In space, you've got microgravity, so you could build things without a scaffold in space. And you think about organ printing, for example, there's some really fascinating areas you could go down if you can really unlock those supply chains.
Solar panels.
That kind
of thing. We've been talking about solar panels in space since the 1940s. One day, perhaps. It does seem like we're kind of finally getting there. We're kind of finally making the business case for doing all this as well, because it's all very well having high-fluting ideas about making stuff in orbit, but actually there's got to be some kind of return. Otherwise, it's not going to.
Absolutely. And everything we do is thinking about how does this benefit life here on Earth, public services, the investment from the taxpayer, that is critical in everything we do.
Yeah.
Yes, you do need that blue sky fundamental research to happen, because you've got to see the idea for these innovations and products and services. But there's also has to make sure there's return as well. So there is a balance there in ensuring that you have those great ideas flourishing while ensuring there's a return as well.
So you've got these 4, am I right? 4 CCNs that are being they're not trialed. What's the word I'm looking for? It's
being piloted so that we can you be agile.
Okay, where are you going with this? So they get piloted, and then what happens? Are you going to do more? Are you going to expand on them? What's the kind of future for?
We don't want to do CCNs just for the sake of it. So whilst the initial program is a 2-year, the intention is that these aren't projects, so that they don't have a start and end date. Right. That this is an investment that we're kind of building this community of interest, this network of people that could collaborate together that wouldn't ordinarily collaborate together. Yeah. So it's about kind of going to a certain maturity level. So first, as Phil said, raising awareness of the opportunities that space data and technology can bring on Earth and in space. The next is kind of how can we use that information about those different communities and what they're working on and the problems that they have to work together on projects that wouldn't have already happened unless they bumped into each other at a water cooler. So then the maturity piece is about, okay, how can we make more impact from these activities? Mm-hmm. So it's about workshops, kind of bringing those people together physically in the room, but it's about them building those relationships and then deepen those ties so that they're much more effective at leveraging investment into a different stakeholder group that wouldn't previously used it.
And for the longevity of the Sci space, CCN, we've got development of a roadmap and also development of kind of consortia building as well. These are really clear stages within the kind of the final year to 6 months of the CCN's initial kind of 2-year iteration. Because as Simone says, we're very keen to maintain these contacts and maintain this collaboration, so it doesn't just end with that one workshop.
No,
we're hoping that collaboration continues and evolves.
Always always say free buffet, whatever the thing is, and then people will come. Definitely.
And then we hope to keep them there.
Exactly. Free unlimited buffet forever.
That's definitely the aim.
Yeah.
No such thing as a free lunch, though.
Well, maybe. What kind of impacts have the CCNs had so far? Have you got anything we can actually sort of pinpoint and talk about?
Yeah, so it's early days to demonstrate how we've created jobs and investment necessarily. But the two CCNs that have been operating the longest, for instance, the Earth Observation Network for Sustainability, UK EONS, they've brought together communities to look at the importance of Earth observation. That includes not talking to just the space sector. So they had a really great event where they showcased Earth observation to a cultural community. So it was actually a performance called Storm Cloud that was run by... it was a theatre performance run by Sheffield Hallam University. And then there was a panel afterwards talking about the importance of Earth observation. So this wasn't your usual space crew that was there discussing Earth observation. It was literally a theatrical performance, people interested in the arts, and then the applicability of Earth observation. So that's a really cool example of talking to other communities.
I love that. In fact, I think we should process all of our data through the medium of modern dance. I think that would work.
Oh, fun. Well, the Sci Space CCN has convened, it's been, by July, it would have been around for 9 months, maybe, around that time. But the first thing that we did, the first kind of work package was convening a working group, which is essentially a group of people who are very knowledgeable about cybersecurity, and then some very knowledgeable about space domain awareness and what that is and what they do in it. And there, we drew people from military, academia, government. We had a few kind of smaller companies as well as larger kind of primes represented there. And we convened for 4 sessions to really talk about what is needed in order to secure SDA. And we began with kind of defining what SDA is. And then we went on to say kind of what are the security requirements at each of these stages.
Domain awareness.
Space domain awareness. And that was a really nice initial sort of convening and defining, the importance of the Sci Space CCN. And from that point onwards, we then move on to what we're currently doing now, which is rolling out workshops as part of a UK-wide mapping exercise to kind of look at this is what we need in order to secure space domain awareness, but what do we already have within UK infrastructure in order to secure it? What are people already experts in? And then from that point onwards, we'll then look at what's missing. But it was really nice to run the working group sessions, and it was really brilliant to see the enthusiasm in the room.
What happens in the working group sessions? I'm kind of, when you were talking about that, I was sort of visualizing what it might. Is it like people talking, or are they doing something, or are they?
Well, it depends really. The first one was in person, and then after that they were online. So the first one was the most fun because it's in person.
Yeah.
And we essentially we had our coffee, we had our lunch. Very important. But as well as that, we also sat round in kind of having roundtable type discussions in which we spoke about what SDA is, and of course, space domain awareness was something different to everyone who came to that discussion. And some people didn't know what space domain awareness really was, but they knew what cybersecurity, they knew, what's important in cybersecurity. So we essentially, the working group discussions are really just, days of discussions and talking. And that's what is happening for these upcoming workshops as well, which will be taking place to kind of look at those capabilities. We're convening all of these workshops around the UK in order to bring people together to talk to each other. Essentially, it's all about talking to each other and saying this is what we've got to help fulfill the security needs for space domain awareness.
With the Beyond Earth CCN, we've taken a slightly different approach. I mean, we haven't even launched it yet, but we've really wanted to get a jump start on this.
Yeah.
And because we're looking at a bit, what could you actually do for the in-space economy? It is further away, no pun intended. So what we've done is actually deploy some collaborative funds, so small amounts of grant money, up to £10,000, released a call just before the holiday season to get different businesses to come up with ideas. And by giving that funding, it gives them the time and the space to de-risk it for themselves, to actually come up with some suggestions for what could be in the in-space economy. And we saw some fantastic ideas.
Give us a couple of examples of fantastic, are they kind of bonkers ideas? Or
No, really grounded in industries they want to explore. So we had the UK Atomic Energy Authority collaborating with a company called Space Solar, looking to develop robotic platforms in space. Space Solar is looking at energy production, so they need robotics if they're going to develop their system.
Yeah.
With a company called BioOrbit, work with a diamond light source here in Harwell to think about how you could do scaled antibody crystal manufacturing, a key component in any pharmaceutical process. If anyone, there's actually 8 projects which are funded. So if people want to learn more, if you go to the STFC Business Innovation LinkedIn page, all those projects are listed there.
Say that again, the
STFC Business Innovation LinkedIn page.
Okay.
And we list all our projects and collaborative funds there.
Fantastic. Wrapping up, I'm wondering what the kind of issues are. What for you, sort of rolling out these pilot schemes and this bringing people together? What kind of problems have you had? Has it been easy? Has it been difficult?
I think one thing is key is, and perfect for the listeners here today, is if they haven't heard of a CCN,
They have
that's
now.
fantastic. Well, they have now, but what we want to hear is what sectors and areas they're working in, interested in, and seeing where they can connect.
Well, give us an example. Like what kind of, like, what do you mean by that?
So if we take the Beyond Earth CCN, which is being led by the Northwest, it's working with other areas of the UK, including Wales, Harwell here, the east of England, etc. In the east of England, you've got fantastic telecommunications companies. Are they aware of where space can impact them?
Yeah.
In the Northwest, we've got great heritage in nuclear. So how is the nuclear industry looking at maybe power production in space, for instance? So this is where we're thinking as to where you have people working in different industries who haven't engaged in the space sector. How can we get them learning more about it, engage these workshops, so you don't have the same organizations talking, you sort of enrich it and they bring their own expertise to this.
And presumably that kind of implies a sense of creative thinking, a sense of thinking differently about doing things, presumably with perhaps sectors who maybe haven't thought creatively. This is the way we do things, and actually offering them something different. And
to come back to the challenges question, it isn't about raising awareness of the opportunities that space brings just for the sake of us saying, yeah, space is great. It's about, okay, how do we solve those problems in a much more effective way? But ultimately, we can't go to those adjacent sectors and say, okay, let's talk to you about space. It's like, we have to show that we understand the problems that they have and talk the same language. So some of the challenges in terms of kind of getting that door unlocked to be able to have that conversation in the first place. So industry, academia together, have different languages and different ways they talk about collaborating. In the same way, different communities will kind of talk about the same problems and use different language.
And each community, they'll have their own perceptions as well, you know. So one issue that I encounter sometimes is that people assume that space is this like vast area very far away that you have to, you know, have a degree in aerospace engineering or physics to engage with. Whereas in actual fact, space is vast and you know, it is vast and it is complex. But space problems need to be solved with an interdisciplinary perspective and an interdisciplinary approach.
Yeah.
You know, they need people to be able to find a way to speak the same language and develop a common language, you know, even though they come from very different disciplines, because space problems are very difficult to tackle. Just, it has to be a collaborative approach. And that's what the CCNs are really good at doing. They are innately collaborative, which I know because I speak to many different groups and clusters and individuals on a daily basis, because, you know, it only works, the CCN only works really well if it is collaborative and if it is a group effort rather than just an individual effort.
We've spent 4 series talking about that. We're kind of wondering, like, why is it that space, which is part of our national critical infrastructure, everything we do is dependent on space, it's still seen as this abstract thing. And occasionally there'll be a bit of news like Katy Perry's gone to space, or we found an alien or something. And people get that bit of news, but then they go back to thinking of it as some kind of abstract thing that has no relevance to
I think
anything.
from my side, sometimes it can be, if we do this, then everyone will understand it. No, it's a continuous, you need to make it relevant. You also need to think, maybe the messaging we've been using is actually to us, not to someone else.
Well, this is my campaign against buzzwords and about language generally, because I actually think language is really important. The way that the language that we use to talk about the space industry matters. And if we go down our own little language silos, then suddenly we're all talking slightly different languages.
Or we're using the same acronym but means different things.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
To play devil's advocate, does it matter that people don't understand that space enables their day-to-day life? The question could be that, can we hide the wiring in the cupboard so that when we're working with those other user groups, we can bring a solution? We don't need to tell them explicitly this is space that's solving that problem, but kind of making sure that we embed the space technology, the space data to solve that problem. We don't have to be explicit in putting a big space badge on it necessarily.
That's interesting. Hiding the wiring in the cupboard. I like that as an analogy. I'm going to steal that.
Yeah, that avoids any kind of anxiety with engaging with space, this vast thing that is space. Yeah, but I think, I think that the space community is more open than people maybe realize. And I think the problem is the word itself, space. I think it encapsulates so much that it has come to mean not enough to people. I think that, we should use a different word to space.
I think that's not a bad idea. When you say space to people, they immediately see Buzz Aldrin standing on the moon, or they see SpaceX something, or whatever it might be. That's kind of tends to be where people go.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one thing I would say to anyone listening here today, in different parts of the UK, there is a dedicated cluster, a space cluster for you, and cluster just being that geography, so your region related to space. So if people want to connect to their space cluster, go to events nearby, all they have to do is type in UK space cluster directory. That will have all the details of those clusters, contact email addresses, websites, etc. It's all in one place.
No one told me about this. I've been doing this for 4 series now.
Well, we're waiting till series 5 to tell you. So, yeah.
This has all been some grand
Build the
plan.
anticipation.
And presumably catapulty people do all this. You can put people in contact with.
Yeah, so absolutely. I mean, we've been working in the UK space ecosystem since 2013, and the UK Space Cluster Directory is a fairly new initiative in the last 2 or 3 years. So instead of us gatekeeping that information and those relationships, putting it out there for everyone to access themselves, so that you don't have to come through the catapult to access your nearest space cluster. You can go and contact them directly, and all that information is in one place. But likewise, if you want some support, we're very happy to kind of help you navigate through that complex landscape.
There you go. If you're nipping out to the shops, perhaps you need to go to Boots or something like that. And if you need to go to your local space cluster for all your space needs, you can do that there.
Or if you have specific expertise relating to one of the CCNs that we've spoken about, today, then definitely reach out to those as well. The SciSpace CCN, that's on the NCC landing page. Generally, you can find on the on Satellite Applications Catapult's website information about the CCNs. And if you're not sure kind of which region you are in, or you don't want to approach it that way, if you look at the expertise that's required, even if you don't work in space at all and you don't see your application to space, if you work in that industry that's listed, then please do reach out to the CCN networks and engage in the CCN activities. We're really motivated to facilitate this collaboration, this communication, and the best way we can do that is by having as many people as possible involved.
I sense a lot of passion. I sense a lot of drive with this.
And do you mind if I make one more plug? Do
it, Phil. Plug.
Just say that the biennial UK Space Conference is coming up in July, 16th and 17th in Manchester.
Oh, yeah.
Be a fantastic program. You'll get to meet all the clusters and CCNs, as well as the wider UK space sector. We would love other people not involved in space to be there. There's sessions on biotech in space, manufacturing space, SciSpace, etc. So come down to Manchester, 16th of July, type in UK Space Conference into your local Google website, and you can find all about the program, how to register for that conference.
Great. Phil, thank you very much. Simone, great pleasure. Jessie, great pleasure. We'll see you then. Thank you for joining us on this episode. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
To hear future episodes of In Orbit, be sure to subscribe on your favourite podcast app. And if you'd like to find out more about how space is empowering your industry, visit the Catapult website or join them on social media.